Hey, Hi, Sharon.
Hey, hi.
How are
Am
you?
am I in the right place? Because the screen this shows me is a different program with Anuradha and Manoj.
Yeah, we'll just change that, I think.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Priya.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing well. Sleepless nights to
I
pull
can
this
imagine
together.
you guys are amazing. What have you somehow magically pulled off? It's very commendable. Amazing, amazing. Huh.
So I got involved about last Monday,
Huh.
and with just one sentence saying we want to have one track on social innovation. You figure out what you want to talk about. You figure out who you want to talk to.
Yeah.
So from that to here, I'm amazed that we have been able to pull it together.
Amazing. It is amazing. Absolutely amazing. It is remarkable.
Are you there, Naman? We need to change the slide. Okay, it
Oh,
is now
shit.
updated. Yes,
Yeah.
Is it
yes,
not
yes,
fine right now?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now it's fine. Yes.
Okay. Hey Sharath, hi.
Hey,
I'm
how are
just
you? Huh.
good. I'm good. I'm
Was just
gonna help Mr.
complimenting
Pramod
all of
get it.
you for an amazing thing that you pulled off here. Amazing.
It's not done yet, so I
You
think we have
know, but it's
to ask you.
oh, that's very nice of you to say that. But still, it's quite remarkable.
Naman is all of 21 years old, and he had a slight heart attack this morning when he got up. He tried to. He logged in at 10 o'clock and said, "Nobody's here. No panelists are here. I don't know what is happening." And I'm like,
Hey,
"Hi,
Arvind, how are
Arvind.
you?
How are you?
Hi, Charat.
Hey, Arvind. Huh.
Hi, Arvind."
Hi. Is somebody sorted Pramod Bhasin's issue on
Yes, yes.
the?
I think
Yes.
Naman sent him a new link. I didn't have any issue joining. It's surprising. Yeah. Okay. I'm waiting for KK and Vinny.
So, Arvind, it's been a long time. We should. We haven't. You must be horribly busy in the middle of all this. How are things?
As busy as more busy than I would have wanted it to be. But it's there is a lot of stuff going on. Some of it some of it is
Yeah.
just madness in terms of Delhi, right? I mean, so how are things with you? You are in Bangalore only, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I'm at home in Bangalore, and happy, busy, no complaints. Lots of stuff happening on the health stack. As you know, there is this.
Right, and has to take prominence now, right? I mean,
So that's kind of.
and you're going to talk about it today, right? In this session also.
No, I don't think so. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
So what we have to make sure that you and me don't replicate each other's things. So you tell me what you're going to
You
talk
take the
about.
first shot at everything. You don't worry. You take the first shot. I'll add on other stuff. So you go first, and then I'll go next. Not an issue at all.
That's a scary thing, Sharat, but that's okay.
Why is it scary? Not scary, man. Not scary.
Pramod's here. Hi, Pramod.
Finally. You are clear, loud and clear. Good connectivity.
Great.
Okay, obviously the other link had expired, guys. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry for that. I think Zoom sometimes gets the better of me.
all of us.
And Naman has done a thesis on Zoom in the last 3 days, so he is going to publish one very soon.
I think we all have, haven't we?
Yeah.
Please, shall we get going?
Yeah, I thought we'll wait for 2 minutes to get the attendees in because we started a little late.
Not scary, man.
All of us.
Yeah.
So I think we're just starting the stream on the Quint on YouTube. So if you can just give me a couple of, I think a minute and a half to set that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're live streaming this on YouTube as well, and we're trying to gather questions there as well as here from the participants. And I will keep typing these questions to the panelists. There is a Q&A box at the bottom, and I'm hoping that the participants will add a lot more questions here. We will also bring in questions from the other channels where we are talking about this panel. Yeah, okay. All right, I think we will
I
get...
have, I'll tell you, my screen still says Charcha 2020 and it's going round and round and round. I can't see anything on my screen yet. Are you showing anything?
Yes, we can see you. Are you not able to see the others?
I can't see the others. Nope. I can see you now. Good.
Okay.
Now I can see the others. Good.
Perfect. Okay. All right.
Sorry about this, guys.
Okay. All right.
I'm an accountant. What do you expect? I'm an accountant. Kya kare?
Welcome back to day 3 of the Social Innovation Track at Charcha 2020. I'm Priya Ajmera and I represent the Nudge Center for Social Innovation. Last 3 days, so many interesting discussions. My head is ballooning with ideas and things I need to read and learn more about. I feel like I have at least 1 week worth of homework ahead. So for the participants, if you missed any of our sessions from day 1 and day 2, please, we will post the links of the YouTube channel, which has all the videos. You can also follow us on our social media pages, where we will be sharing learnings and the YouTube links of all the sessions. Because we started a little late, I'm going to quickly talk a little bit about the social innovation track. That the objective of social innovation track was to focus on the long-term view about the sector and what do we all need to do to enable that view. I will skip on what we did in the last 2 days, and I will jump directly to the session today. The session that we are bringing to you today is a very important conversation about technology for inclusive development. How do we build technology backbone that bridges the digital divide and also helps improve the efficiency and efficacy of the tremendous work that is being done by the development sector? We have gathered together a stellar panel of entrepreneurs who have built multiple large organizations and have been on the front end of India's tech growth story. I will introduce the moderator, Pramod Bhasin, and then he'll set the context and talk about everyone on the panel. Pramod's career spans a professional and entrepreneurial journey in financial services and business process management across the globe. He led Genpact as president and CEO. He led GE Capital in India and Asia. He's also the co-founder of Asha Impact, a virtual fund which is focused on social impact investments and advocacy. He has been the chairman of NASSCOM and noted IT Man of the Year by DataQuest. Even though he calls himself accountant, I think that's a great way to kickstart the session with the IT Man of the Year. Please take it away, Pramod.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have a fabulous panel. I'll tell you, I couldn't ask for a better panel here to join in this discussion. I won't go through introductions for each person, but I will request that perhaps as I come to each one of you, you could spend 1 or 2 minutes just on a description of yourself. I thought I wouldn't do that and move right into the discussion. I think this is one of the most fascinating aspects of the world today. How do we use technology for inclusive development? I think there's an amazing confluence happening. Finally, technology is getting so advanced that we can start to attack some of the biggest social problems in the world. And I'm not talking about technology for personal technology use and social media use, but really technology which can help solve some of the leading issues in healthcare, water, data analytics, pollution, all of it brought to intense focus by this event called COVID that is happening all around us. And the fact is that we are now globally interconnected, as we are showing, and yet at the same time, the world is going to try and break its supply chains apart in ways that are unprecedented and will certainly reverse some of the years of progress that we have made of working together. Within that, our own ecosystem in India desperately needs help in 1,000 different ways. Our schools, our education systems, our healthcare infrastructure, the issues around water, the issues around getting information to farmers and agricultural areas. We can go on, and there's no need to do that. I think we're all very familiar with them. But technology, to me, tends to be the only real solution that we have that can cut across many different lines and allow us to find far-reaching and, very importantly, very cost-effective solutions that are being prepared and that we need in a country like India. We don't really have time to build the massive infrastructures that perhaps we need. We have to do that as well, but there's short and medium-term solutions that we desperately look for. With that introduction, as technology being the core driver for inclusive development, I'll turn it over to my panelists. What we'd love to do is speak for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and then get into question and answer some of the audience questions, and probably end just before 12 o'clock, just 2 minutes before 12 o'clock, as some of us have to jump onto another call. But with that, may I first turn to Arvind Gupta, please. Arvindji, you and I have been discussing, we've had many discussions in the past. The topic that you mentioned to me in the comments that you had sent me was, how do we build local technology solutions at affordable prices, which solve the problems in India? So with that, I'd love to turn it to you. And then, Sharad, if you don't mind, I'm going to come to you after that.
Yeah, thank you, Pramod, and good morning to everyone. Quickly, I think the topic is very pertinent because, as you introduced, Pramod, whether COVID and with COVID, the need of technology to really scale up to deliver to more than 1.25 billion Indians, 1.3 billion Indians has really become even more important and more pivotal in India's journey pre-COVID and during COVID and post-COVID. Given that the local technology infrastructure and why that's more important is something that I will mention. See, India did and with no political overtones to it, India did a very intelligent thing about 10 years ago. It started building out its own platforms. And they were not platform as a platform that we envisage today, but given that the 4 or 5 platforms that come from Silicon Valley and 3 or 4 platforms that come from China, India didn't have its native platform of its own. Today we have one. And courtesy and some of this is repetitive. You have the Aadhaar platform, which not only does identity but also does multiple things because it's so integrated, layered with many other things. This Aadhaar stack or the India stack, many names it has got. It is the story of how a local platform, not only just local, something as a public good, which is helping India in multiple ways. And let me just give you an example. You saw many countries which did interventions for COVID, special interventions for COVID, whether it was food coupons or some kind of income support during these troubled times. You had queues outside each of those government or semi-government offices to collect those payments or to enable those payments to come into their bank accounts or cash or food coupons, whatever form they may be. India, nothing of that sort happened. When the Prime Minister's Garib Kalyan package was announced, over 300 million people, households primarily, got the money directly into their bank accounts without even visiting an office, without even filling an application form. So you had the amounts of money that were transferred instantaneously over 2 or 3 days were there in the bank accounts. And to put that money to work, they could use multiple technologies, whether it was a postal bank to withdraw that money if they needed to withdraw using Aadhaar-enabled payment systems, or just using plain old UPI to make payments to person-to-person payments to merchants to buy goods, to anything else. The long story short of this is, Pramod, that India today has its own platforms, which is not only used by the government, but is used by private sector, by startups, by society at large. And this is something that we control and we own. And unlike most of the other countries, this is being put to use where lesser money is being involved to deliver a higher benefit. Gone are the days when we used to talk about $100 going away from government coffers and only $15 of that reaching the end user. Today, if 100 leaves the government coffers, all the 100 reaches the last mile. It comes to their bank account. There is no attenuation in between. So I think that's the story of success that India has. A very simple example also, I'll leave it and then let others comment on it, is that how technology has been able to scale up. Pensioners in India, and if there is a lot of Indian audience, they will symbolize with this movie called Munna Bhai MBPS, where this old man walks into a pensioner's office, strips himself of all of his clothes because the government officer was not signing his proof of life. I don't know if you recall that, but that's
Very
a
much
memory I have. And once that scene is no longer required, because we have something called proof of life that can be given by a Aadhaar biometric. And today, more than 3.5 crore Indians, senior citizens, avail of that. They don't need to leave their homes. They can go to an assisted center. They can just give their proof of life of what is called Jeevan Pranam certificate, and they get their pensions directly into their bank account. So I think the India story of local for really solving challenges at scale, a bottom-up innovation, making sure that every citizen is included, is a remarkable story. And every day this is coming to use, whether it's COVID, pre-COVID, or post-COVID, and it's only going to build upon that. So I'll just leave the opening comments.
Thank you, Arvind. I'm going to come back to you on the platform point, which you're making, which is very eloquent. Actually, I've always been struck by the fact that Aadhaar was built on a budget, which, had it been built probably in a developed country like the UK or the US, would have been 5 times its size. And I think that's a representation of how we can build something fantastic at the cost that we can afford. But Sharad, you know a lot about this. You know a lot about platforms. But talk to us a little bit, please, about how you would, where would you focus in terms of inclusive development? But may I just ask also quickly, please, just a brief introduction would be great. Arvind, actually, may I come back to you just for a brief introduction first, and then we'll move to Sharad.
Yeah, hi. I work at the cross section of, worked in politics, worked in government, been lucky enough to be inside the government for many years, and been a startup tech entrepreneur for many years. So multiple hats, multiple roles. I also teach as a passion at IIT BHU. So, worked in Silicon Valley long enough to know, that development there is focused on the top billion. And that's why I say India innovates for the top. The next 6 billion innovation is going to come from India.
Very good. Sharad, over to you.
All right. So I'm here as an iSpiritor, and iSpirit is a non-profit technology think tank run by volunteers. And excuse me. And personally, I still see myself as a Unix kernel engineer. Think in terms of kernel, not the OS, not the application. And I'll come back to that analogy in a minute. And but I've done a bunch of things. I've been mostly on the R&D side and been an entrepreneur, sold a company to Cisco. And for the last 10 years, have been involved either in angel investing or in stuff like iSpirit. So now, what's the new innovation architecture that is becoming possible? So, and why is it difficult for us as Indians to see this innovation architecture? These are the 2 questions that I want to answer in my opening remarks, and then, we'll come back to them if needed. So the innovation architecture that we should think of is a jugalbandi between public infrastructure and private innovation, right? And that public infrastructure in India, very hard to fix the physical public infrastructure, although that's improving rapidly as well. But we can leapfrog and have world-class digital public infrastructure. This is what Arvind talked about in terms of payments with something like UPI, digital identity. India is the first country in the world to have democratized digital identity. We have DigiLocker. We have now something called the account aggregator for consented flows of data. Probably the world's most advanced system of sharing financial data today. Health is coming with digital public infrastructure in the same way, called health stack, and so on and so forth. So now the magic happens when actually innovation is digital public infrastructure and private innovation. And the easiest way to understand this is even something as simple as Uber. You know, Uber would not exist if there was no GPS. So Uber is public infrastructure called GPS and private innovation called Uber, and that reimagines how you hail a taxi, right? And so the Silicon Valley model, this is very clear to them. And why is it clear to them? Because if you are, let's say, a real estate developer there, you will wait for the layouts to happen, for the sewage to be put in place, you know, for the physical infrastructure to be put in place before you go out and build either residential or commercial buildings. Here in India, that's not the case. I live in Bangalore, and you know, in Bangalore, we have many, you know, very nice apartment complexes, you know, where everything is world class on the inside. But when you step out, you know, there's a narrow lane that takes you to the road, and the road is choked, right? So in India, we have traditionally said, hey, let's not rely on physical public infrastructure because, you know, who knows when that will come. Let's just do our private innovation and we'll see what happens. Now, in this model, you never get scale. You get scale only when the two come together. And luckily, as Arvind pointed out, India has the most vigorous program in the world today to build digital public infrastructure. And it is coming up in a number of areas. So if there is one takeaway I want to leave with you, is make bets on that public digital infrastructure. You can make those bets now. You can be sure health infrastructure will work because the 7 things that came before that, all 7 have worked. so why would the 8th and the 9th and the 10th not work? So make that bet that it will work, plan on that working, and then go for scale right from day one. And that is going to be the model that we should go after in the future. So, you know, we'll come back to this a little later, but that's my opening kind of scenario here.
I think it's a very good point, Sharad. I think the number of people who are not fully aware of what the possibilities are is immense. Frankly, you know, when Nandan set up Aadhaar, his vision and imagination for what you could do with it was phenomenal. And again, we have so many other platforms, the health stack being, to me, one of the most important, where I think the world, not just India, but the world, I think should see how these are being developed, because no other country has these, by the way, at this scale. And I think the benefit it can bring a broad group of people, and it doesn't matter whether you're in a developed country or a country like India, the benefits these can bring are absolutely enormous. It's a bit like setting up the NHS in the UK. It is wide-ranging, it has enormous impact. So we'll come back to that. KK, I'm going to leave you to the last on this one and go to Vineet first. Vineet, you keep saying you're an entrepreneur and not a technologist, although you use technology for all your entrepreneurial benefit ventures. Talk to us a little bit about where should technology focus in India? How do you see it happening, given the work that you do with Avishkar and others? How do you see that happening? Where can we use it the best? How do we bring it to impact us where it matters the most? You're on mute, I think, Vineet.
Yep. Thank you, Prabodh. And it was lovely to hear from Arvind and Sharad. So I've not met both the gentlemen, but I have heard of them. So lovely to know everyone. I think let me start with a namaskar. Given the COVID times, that's probably the best way to engage with everybody. Anyway, we are all virtual. So my name is Vineet, and I actually I chair Avishkar Group, which does everything from microfinance to large-scale impact investing on the other end. So we do everything from 5,000 rupees to around 150 crores of investments. Our only goal is to work with the emerging 3 billion from the bottom and create and harness opportunities for their going forward. And we have generally been focusing on harnessing entrepreneurial potential of individuals, either coming from that strata or those who want to work with that strata, and providing them high risk capital, you know, of all forms and shapes. Now, I think if one looks around and sees that is development necessarily going to happen because technology will play a role, if you just look at microfinance and what Professor Yunus did, by coming up with the idea of social collateral. I think he basically came up with an idea which was as powerful as probably $1 trillion. Just the claim, poor is bankable, is probably worth $1 trillion in terms of valuation if you apply a value to it. Now, there was no technology in it. There was understanding of social science there. And what role did technology play? Actually, technology did not play any role for a significant period of time in microfinance. But as microfinance started scaling up, as institutions, you started realizing that there is a need for them to behave more like banks, and therefore technology started playing a role. And today, when you, and I think as you all know, microfinance went from less than $10 million in 2001 when I started investing in microfinance as for the whole country. So the entire India was less than $15 million. Today, I think our exposure is in close to $50 billion. So it's a sector that has gone. It only works with the poorest of the poor, allows them an opportunity, uses all kinds of technology. So today, microfinance is cashless on the front end. It's almost cashless on the back end, which means it's no more cash logistics. It's actually delivery and engagement of very poor people with an institutional structure that follows a process, that follows a social collateral, but does it all through technology. So if you go to rural UP, Bihar, Assam, wherever you go, you would actually see cashless operations taking place right at the grassroots at the lowest level. Now, this is actually one example which has been very successful and scaled up. Let's actually start taking to the Prime Minister's ask for, can you double farmers' income in 5 years? I met a young guy who was working with ICICI Bank, wanted to go back to Bihar and wanted to digitize, create a farm grain bank, digitize one bag of grain. His claim was average holding, and this guy is actually not necessarily coming from one of the top MBA institutions, etc. He was a very simplistic, young, smart Bihari guy who simply said, listen, the average acreage is very small. People produce 5, 10, 20, 100 bags of grains. And the warehousing facility in India is 50,000 tons and above. So if you want to really do anything in terms of increasing farmers' income, you need to provide an opportunity for them to store, add value, finance, and do it. And it cannot be done with 50,000 tons warehouses. So what do? I want to create warehousing where farmers live, right next to them. And this would mean that they will become miniaturized warehouses. And I will use digitization to convert each bag of grain into a digital currency. And then I can further trade it. We gave him $500,000 and March 2020, right in the midst of COVID, I have invested another $6 million. Now, what has he done in last 5 years? He has set up 40 different warehouses where any farmer with one single grain of bag can come. He can digitize the grain. There are certain basic parameters on which the grain comes in. So it's paddy of this kind, 5% is the maximum roughage that is allowed. And then you actually digitize it and then give him a passbook. It's a digital passbook as well. So his phone, he gets a passbook. And when he comes to take it, like we go to bank, deposit money, and when we take the money, you get a different note. Same thing applies. Also, they can actually then allow a lender to give 70% loan against the bag that has been put in there to this farmer. And then in 6 months' time, are delivering between 1.4 to 1.8x increase to the farmer consistently for 5 years. The reason why digitization is important is not just because to sell. The digitization is important because they are able to create value with 50 and 100 very decentralized warehouses because of the digital. So when they are selling, they can actually simply sell from 3 warehouses and not need to pick up what farmers want to sell from individual warehouses, which will make it impossible for them to make money. So that's the kind of, so very niche idea, very this thing. Just to give you an idea, post the reforms that you heard, this organization has the potential to become a $10 billion enterprise in less than 7 to 8 years. Just to give you an idea of the quantum and the scale potential possible, and it actually has the potential to increase farmers' income by 1.5 times in 6 months. So I'll stop here just to tell you of what can be done, both in terms of what Sharad said, creating this massive infrastructure that is on the public platform, but also at the same time, the entrepreneurial zeal who has the instinct to understand the problem and doing it counts.
What a brilliant story, Vinit. I think it's such a niche idea, and how few people, I don't know how many others could have thought about it other than people who are really deeply embedded in the in these areas, in these parts of India, to have envisaged and imagined this idea. I'll come back to you because there are many areas like that that we should attack. And partly my question, I'm also going to go to Sharad and Arvind on this, which is how do we pull a lot of these ideas together? One of the things I saw Israel doing extremely well is they pulled their ideas together. They provide ecosystems to do that. And Sharad, particularly with iSpirit, is that something that we could think about doing? But KK, I'm going to turn to you, if I may, please, as the founder and head of Mindtree. How do we use technology for inclusive development much more than we've done today? How do we accelerate that? How do we make it work better? All yours.
Thanks, Pramod. I think great ideas have come from Arvind, Sharad, and Vineet. But what personally I'm very excited about the role of technology is that in practice, one has seen that technology is the only option by which you can really solve social problems at scale. What is also the ground enabling condition is that I think today, if you look at, one could always think that India is very large, diverse, and there are unique problems. But on the other hand, if you look at the digital savviness of a large population in India, you have 1.2 billion smartphones, there are 1.3 billion Aadhaar registrations and close to 500 million plus internet users, all of which give a very fertile ground to think about how you can implement technology initiatives to solve large social problems. The first thing needs to be that I think we should look at some of the large problems which we face, which can sometimes be unique as opportunities, and think about how you can intelligently leverage technology to solve these problems. So a lot of these thoughts and the conviction that technology can solve social problems really came because as Mindtree and being one of the co-founders of Mindtree, I had the real privilege of being associated with the Aadhaar program, having been very closely associated with building the backend. And one of the key realizations we had was while technology to, in a way, set identification was really world-class. And you said it could cost 5 times more if it had been developed in a developed economy. I just want to share it was not 5 times. We built it at a cost which was 1/10 of what was the cost which some of our global competitors had sort of bid for that. The experience out of building Aadhaar and the ground level experience we got in terms of how you need to get on the ground experience to leverage technology. At Mindtree, we started looking at what could be large social problems which you can address, and we took up the area of waste management. The reason why we took up waste management was when we looked at some data with respect to people associated with that, it was really stunning. In fact, the average life expectancy of a male was 39 years. The average life expectancy of a female was 32 years, partly because they were not trained and they were dealing with waste, not adopting basic methods of safety. So when we looked at solving this problem, we said we must address the change management issues associated with training, giving people a sense of pride doing their job, as well as leveraging technology to solve it. So the manner in which we went about doing it was to set up a cooperative of rack pickers. We started calling them waste management professionals, associated an NGO with them, got an organization to train people on the need to segregate waste. So that was all what I call the change management associated. Now, shifting on to the technology, we found that rack pickers are wandering around aimlessly thinking of picking waste. So the citizens whom we had trained, we built an application which is pretty much like Uber. And taking on Sharad's observation, using a public platform like GPS and the technologies available. We identified a method of how do you send the rack picker or the waste management professional source closest to the waste generation source to go and collect the waste in an electric vehicle which we gave them, and really made their own process of waste collection far more optimal. Beyond that, we set up what we call dry waste collection centers. It's there in Bangalore, and many corporates like Coke supported us to set it up in other cities where we went. But the most important way in which we leveraged technology was that for dry waste, we set up a marketplace. Because for those of you who are not aware of the value chain, the price for PET bottles may differ from an aluminum can to the cap which is there on a PET bottle. And many times middlemen were making money and the rack pickers were not getting enough value. By setting up a marketplace and encouraging corporates to come and buy in that, we really ensured a direct connect, like what has been announced by the FM in terms of agricultural products, between the dry waste collection centers and the corporates. And corporates like Unilever, Ultratech Cements, which were mandated to generate alternate energy, found a very credible supply of dry waste for their alternate energy sources.
Yes. Yeah.
And in short, I think the average capacity of the waste management professionals improved by 3x in all the 50 cities in which it runs now. So yeah. I think you can leverage technology even to solve a problem, but it has to be with a very defined impact output, which must be measurable. That's the other learning which I have in terms of doing this.
Fantastic, KK. Thank you for that. I think, I'm sorry, I'm just moving forward because I think, I want to get a lot more in. And there are four such distinguished panelists that, 1 hour is obviously way too short. But let me throw it back to all of you again, if I may. We have so many different pools of innovation, so many different areas where people are experimenting and finding great solutions. One of the great things that I saw in Israel is they seem to be able to bring an ecosystem together, which works very effectively, where people bounce ideas off each other. They work very strongly with institutions. They work very strongly with government, so that triple network that they've built between entrepreneurs and startups and institutions and universities and government is very, very tight. Sorry, the fourth would be the venture capitalists. How can we do more of that today? We can upend the traditional way of doing this, as we have done by building public platforms. That's really a model very different from what many of the Western countries that we followed have done. How can we take that to a different level to pool in ideas and really attack very basic stuff? Poverty, exclusion, health, the issues around healthcare. Let me turn that back to you. Let me come to you first, Sharad, if I may. I'll come to you, Arvind, and then anybody else, please raise your hand and we'll move forward. If we can keep the answers short, that would be great.
Yeah. So we got to play a new game, and a new game needs new players, new type of players. And when cricket was 5-day and then moved to 20 overs, we needed an athletic Gavaskar. Right? The old Gavaskar won't cut it anymore. And in fact, our cricket team, as you know, they had an under-19 program where the rule, it was, by the way, internally called the Athletic Gavaskar program. And they told the new players that were coming in, even if you're as good as Gavaskar but not athletic, can't be in the team. Even if you're as good as Kapil Dev and not athletic, you can't be in the team. And many of you know that whole program generated a whole new under-19 team, subsequently headed by Virat Kohli, and went on to become quite successful. We know the story. This happened in hockey. Hockey, when you needed to be a good dribbler, when AstroTurf came in, you needed to be a dribbler and have speed and stamina. We fought the AstroTurf for 10-15 years. Then our players fought the AstroTurf for 10-15 years. And it's only in the last 10-15 years where a new class of a hockey player has emerged that India is beginning to rise again. In your neck of the Pramod, this happened with wrestling. When wrestling went from the mud pit to the mat, the wrestler changed. Now the point is the game has changed. The scalable game of philanthropic work, scalable game of NGOs has changed. And therefore, we need a new type of a social entrepreneur that has to come in. Now, that is not happening right now. And why is it not happening? Because we are not recognizing the mindset that holds us back. And I'll give you an example of this. Today, UPI does much 1.5 times more transactions than American Express does worldwide on a single day. And we are 2 years away where Indian UPI will do more transactions in India than MasterCard will do worldwide. And yet, when UPI was launched on February 13th, 2016, 321 people came to attend that launch. It was a launch in Taj Vivanta in Bangalore. Only one of them was a VC, and that VC was Alok Goyal of SAFE. So we teased him. We said, "Where are your other VC friends?" He said, "Boss, frankly, even I am here because I am an ex-Googler and therefore I wanted to come." So we asked the many VCs. He says, "Why are you not there? Why are you not taking advantage of it?" Their answer was, "This is not like China, and this is not like US." And although we created billions of dollars of value in PhonePe, in many other companies, our VC industry actually did not partake of this at all. Because we did not understand, even as enablers of those entrepreneurs, that the game has changed. Now, of course, there is no problem. Now, in the health stack, VCs compete with each other to figure out how do they become part of this. This is the shift that has to happen. The shift that has to happen is we got to recognize that the class of problems that could be solved by building a new app, new Android app, have been solved. The new class of problems require a new OS. The new OS requires a new kernel. And the new kernel is coming from India. The new OS is coming from India. And therefore, you'll need a new class of apps that will come up. And until the players themselves understand this story, and until the investors in those players and the philanthropic partners in those players understand the story, things will not change. But I think we are at that cusp where we were in the case of commercial entrepreneurship for India in 2016. We are there for social entrepreneurship in India in 2020. So in the next 2-3 years are going to be the golden years for athletic Gavaskars. Athletic Gavaskars as entrepreneurs and athletic Gavaskars as investors. But it's going to be a very painful transition. If you're successful, you have no incentive to do that. So you will very often see new players, just like you have saw this happen.
There's enough new players. I think passionate, wonderful, Sharad. I think fantastic. Look, I'm with you totally. I really think we do not have to follow old models tried elsewhere with different demographics, different circumstances. We have to come up with solutions that work for us. Arvind, I'm going to come to you because I think this is core to what you've been saying. And I think also this concept that everything must be done in the technology area by the private sector is such old hat that it really, to me, also smacks of a very, very antiquated way of thinking. But Arvind, let me turn to you because you are at the heart of this also.
I won't repeat what Sharad has already said, but a couple of points I think are very important. Number one, building on to what Sharad said, government itself has become a VC. For the difficult areas where nobody wants to invest, I think the 10,000 crore startup fund. So the government is walking the talk. And this is a very mindset change inside the government. And I think the other changes that are required, I mean, the government is such a big machinery that, either in times of COVID, you see it working completely or otherwise it's broken. And three things I want to mention quickly. Number one, that COVID did many disruptions. And one of the disruptions that is going to be long-term sustainable is the policy changes that COVID has brought about. It gave the government a kind of a strong hand to make many disruptions. Health telemedicine was one of them. You saw in 2 weeks, a lot of ordinances put aside and, or new rules made for telemedicine, for e-pharmacies. Similarly, what you've seen yesterday is the Essential Commodities Act completely changed the game, and APMCs. And many people have asked the question, when will farmers be able to sell directly? I think the deregulation of the APMCs will actually enable that happening. Just because we don't need to keep talking about digital and some of the big stacks and we can keep talking about it for hours, I do want to mention Another disruption that has happened is the thinking, what you talk about, Pramod, I think is very clear today. We need technology, whether it's prompted by the Prime Minister's office or the Niti Aayog or the Ministry of IT, everywhere. I think the first time when we start having a new problem and a solution to that, the first thinking is get a bunch of volunteers, technologists, iSpirit, NASCOM, everybody together. Let's solve this. And that's a very collaborative effort. That's a new effort that we are seeing.
Yeah.
1,500 laws has been, and this is a very big developmental issue. We've seen 1,500 laws which were holding up many, many lower level courts, antiquated, redacted. Two, we saw the announcement from the Prime Minister, one nation, one ration card. Again, a very, very core issue. And it is built upon one of the 5 pillars of post-COVID relaunch of India or reboot of India, which is technology-driven systems. So again, whenever things have to be done at scale, the first thinking is let's get our technology at work, at play. And lastly, I think within the bureaucracy also, there's a lot of fresh blood that is coming in within the government thinking. There's been a lot of lateral entries that have gone inside the government. And I think that is also going to drive a lot of change going forward. So I just want to leave it there.
Yeah, Arvind, I'll add 2 things. I think one, we need to figure out how to do this at the state level also. I think it's very important. How do we get this into the states? Because it's happening at the central level. And of course, some of these things have to be tackled there. But for instance, health, implementation of the health stack at the state level, the analytics that go into it, etc. And education and training. The one thing we haven't touched on yet is education and training. And how do we use technology to really spread that? We are way behind in education and training. I will tell you, I am always appalled as how successive governments do not pay adequate attention to it. I don't know why. And this has happened for the last 30 years. And so we are being left behind. So I really want to touch on those 2 areas also. Vineet, let me come to you on education, training, or whatever else you wanted to. How do we accelerate the adoption of technology to solve those problems? Because without education, for instance, no country can progress without it. None, anywhere in the history of this world. So we can easily abandon models perhaps that have been created in other countries, but then we must embrace something else very large, the way we're embracing some of the platforms right now. Let me turn it to you and KK. We don't have much time left, sadly, but at least let me go through a couple of more questions.
Let me actually very quickly touch on points that Sharad raised. Why are the VC not in the room? Well, because the VCs are not supposed to be in the room. They are there to actually, the theory is greed is good. And I think post-COVID, greed is good is dead. I think resilience with returns is going to be the new philosophy, and sustainability would be right at the middle and center of all decision making. For all those who control capital, and control capital is $200 trillion of capital that lies with what 0.01 or 0.1% of the world's population. And those people are not going to forget COVID in a hurry, because that has brought the fear of God in their minds. So there is something called, India had pioneered, like many good things that we have done in technology, India also pioneered the concept of impact investing. Much before the world actually figured the name out. The term impact investing got coined in 2008, but some of us existed in 2001 onwards. And I think there were 8 of us when we decided to call ourselves impact investors. It happened in Bellagio in Italy. What has happened between 2001 and 10 was a survival of impact investing. 2010 and 20, impact investing tried to mimic venture capital instead of trying to tell venture capital that you should become like us. Some of us who were purists continued to behave strangely and kept investing in ridiculous ideas in very difficult areas, but the rest of the world actually started trying to behave like private equity and venture capital. I think post 2020, what you will see is a complete reallocation of capital. The good thing is the world of capital knows the word impact investing. There is a line item now in a capital allocation. And what you would see is a significant movement of that capital towards impact investing. As you already might know that Bain Capital, KKR, everybody has now an impact fund. I think between 2020 and 2030, they will be held accountable for using the word impact. Till now, the cheapest thing to do is put in, I think to be an impact fund today, you have to just put in a suffix called impact behind your name. and basically produce a $20,000, $50,000 report for a $2 billion fund, which is quite cheap. I mean, I can do it even in a lesser fund as well. To create real impact requires audacious decision to be taken, to have 100 times better understanding of what is happening on the ground, and not to put the old wine into a new bottle and call it impact investing. So what I am predicting is the world is going to create a very large amount of capital that would seek impact. And because this is a large amount of capital, it will seek accountability and ask, what is your strategy to be different? Because today in India, that is not very different. I mean, my follow-on investors are Axel, Chirate, and others. So if Avishkar makes an investment, somebody has asked this question, do India has an app that can actually do this? Well, India has lots of apps to have for farmers to do very different things. And a lot of investors are actually now, the mainstream venture capital investors are following through in a lot of these companies. Some of it, unfortunately, they think is technology. What they don't understand, and this is what I would actually keep telling people, that UPI's success is because you understood a problem and you came up with a solution. It is not because of technology, but technology played a very critical role because those who were trying to solve the problem first understood the problem. I think similarly, if you want to apply technology in agriculture or waste, KK talked about a beautiful example. We actually built a 500-ton per day waste management company from scratch in 6 years' time with, can you believe it, $7 million, actually $4 million investment, from zero to a turnover of around $70 million in 6 years' time, 500 tons per day, and it is still just in 3 cities, can become a $1 billion company in the next 4 or 5 years. Capital thought process can go a long distance by using technology. And I completely agree with Sharad and Arvind's point that technology, both public and private, has a very important role to play. But without understanding the problems and coming up with the right solutions, technology, which is a very massive enabler and can actually create new business models, would not make a difference if people just burn money to seek growth at all costs. And I think that's really the fear I have right now. When venture capitalists who don't understand the problem solving on the grassroots walk in. The other important point, which I think we keep missing on, is growth is important, solution is important, but you are also playing with the lives of very vulnerable folks, whether it is small-time farmers or waste picker or a very poor person in microfinance. We need to actually create much more responsible and empathetic boards of the companies who understand the real life. I mean, today in this world, post-COVID, when India is locked down, if we go in the market and start trying to extract every penny out from whatever is left with people, we will have a revolution taking place. So we shouldn't actually be contributing in a negative way as well. So I'll just stop here.
Yeah, well said, Vineet. I think the one point you're making about, impact investors not trying to behave like VCs is an important one, because we tend to replicate or try the same thing over, and there's no need to. We have to find new model and different models. I'm going to circle up very quickly. KK, I'm going to come to you for a few remarks, maybe on education. I'd love to get your thoughts. And then circle back to everyone just for 2 minutes. How do we significantly accelerate this entire adoption of technology to drive inclusive growth? Just a few thoughts on that, just a minute each. And then I think we'll have to, in fact, close. But KK, let me come to you if I could ask you just for a minute or two to talk about either education or where else should we apply the development technology for inclusive development?
Pramod, I'll comment on the second point. I would think if you want to drive innovation, you rightly talked about the Israel example, which is very government driven. But I think in the Indian context, because of the diversity of the problem and the need to find unique solutions, I think private enterprises should come in that role of being a convener to solve the problems. Again, sharing from my experience in NASSCOM Foundation, one of the key themes is to drive technology for social good. I think the annual process of having a contest, identifying the top 5 interesting ideas and really mentoring and supporting them to reach scale, I think has really worked. So based on my experience, my process would be to encourage private enterprises to take a role in solving very specific areas of problem by engaging at the ground level and trying to scale that up.
Very good, KK. Okay. Let me go around to everyone, please. what else would you do? How do you bring all these ideas together? What can we do to bring them together? Because we have so many different pockets of ideas. Sharad, your passionate discussion that you were having about building a new game. What is the new game we can come out with over here? How do we build out that new game? What can we do to accelerate the momentum we have? So I'm going to go around again, please, very briefly, because I think we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left in total. Arvindji, what do you think? How do we bring all these efforts together is my core point, because scalability remains a challenge. We have tons of great ideas, for instance, on apps for farmers, for waste, for many things, and yet achieving scale has been a problem. Israel does a masterful jobs at this. Many other countries do. Singapore does it. By the way, Scandinavian countries also do very, very well in these areas by bringing all the people together. I wonder how much more we could do by bringing all the participants together.
Yeah, I think the 3 points I would quickly make in the interest of time. Number one, we have to involve, to your point, the federal and the state governments together. It's a federal structure in India, and a lot of these problems we have to have enough people, good leaders, political leaders, bureaucratic leaders working in tandem. Two, and I think that's where India does well, by the way. I mean, technology is one area, digital is one area, innovation is one area that everybody wants to grab a piece of the pie. I think we just need, better coordination. Two, I think some of the comments, and I'll respond to that comment also, that I think we have to also understand the notion that rural India today, and especially with reverse migration happening, is no longer digitally unconnected. We have 660 million unique internet users in India, and all of them don't live in cities. So there is a very non-urban resident in India, which is very much connected. They probably don't have that much buying power. So, we'll have to think more innovatively how to serve that audience, bit sizing your transaction, bringing it lower and serving that audience. And lastly, I think we do need a disruption in how we fund these massive things. It's glad that what Vineet is saying, what Sharad is saying now, the VCs are participating in this. But the initial resistance, whether it's impact investing or VCs, they do want to come in at a later stage. So what Vineet is saying is, if people want to participate, they have to get participate at a very, very early stage. And we have to think how to disrupt at that stage itself in terms of putting money into the system.
Yeah. Very good, Arvind. Sharad, I'm going to come to you because I think what I was hoping that with the backing of someone like iSpirit, which is a nonprofit, is there a way to pull many more pieces of the puzzles together and create a much larger forum, which allows young startups, entrepreneurs, old codgers like me to come together, leverage off each other, and build scalable solutions?
Absolutely. And I think the place to start is reimagining. So for example, in the case of credit, and our goal with iSpirit is to keep it small, but allow many more iSpirits to come up, because we can only do a handful of things. But one of the things that we are doing is reimagining credit in India. And so clearly MFIs have done a very good job. They're roughly about, hopefully as things go well, they'll be in the range of about 2 lakh crores as the loan book. But the reimagined credit, which is a cash flow lending, flow-based credit, and you can hold me, I'm saying this publicly, by end of next year, in less than 18 months, will be bigger than what microfinance has achieved in 20 years. Now that requires reimagining everything entirely. Now this vision of democratizing credit at scale brings a lot of people together, but it also has incumbents who fear it. Similarly in health, we know diagnosis. COVID is a great example. You can't diagnose by looking at the symptoms. You got to do a test. All the diagnosis will be biomarker based and not symptom based. The question is, can India be the first country to make biomarker based diagnosis available to every Indian at a scale that has not been imagined anywhere in the world? The answer to that is yes. And those kind of visions then bring people together, and then everybody has a reason to participate in it, because everybody has a piece of the pie that they bring to the table, and that mosaic comes together and people move forward. And I think in those places where we are able to tangibilize a credible vision which looks feasible, then it brings people together, and we need to do more of that as we go forward. And I am quite confident that I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that is starting to happen, and that will happen at a larger scale as we move forward.
I think you've hit two very important points. Democratizing credit remains one of the golden opportunities, I think, because financial inclusion stakes in India are still so low, so few people are included. And yet it's obvious that many of them should be great credits, and we have no ways. So I'm delighted you're doing that. Vineet, let me come to you. How do we drive scale across the board in many of these areas?
I think the word reimagination that Sharad used is quite powerful. I think most folks here probably do not know, but since 2009, we have been actually organizing a forum called Sankalp Forum in India, Indonesia, and Africa, where we pick up the young and the bright and actually not only fund them, but pick up 30 people, get all investors from across the globe. So we get physically 50 countries to participate in India, Indonesia, and Africa every year. And India is actually the center of the universe of social entrepreneurship in that sense.
Yes.
Companies have been actually scaled up through that process. I would actually seek involvement of Arvind, Sharad, and KK as well. And Pramod, you have some idea about what we have been doing because of Asha involvement as well.
Of course.
But this actually is a movement. So when we reimagine, Sharad talked about the micro, small, medium enterprise space. Since 2010, we have been actually investing. I mean, we have actually a $150 million portfolio in just MSME space. Very small, unlike microfinance, which was able to scale up. But microfinance took its time. It actually also took its time to scale up. MSME portfolio, because of inherent risks and lack of understanding of cash flow based management and some other complications that exist, has taken much longer. But my belief is with the fintech revolution taking place on one side and non-banking finance companies realizing that collateral-based space has been taken up by the banks, both public and private sector, the only way for you to survive and build a much larger portfolio is to be an MSME. And you need to do things differently than how you have been doing. So I personally believe that there is a movement that is possible. I think what I need, and I have been actually trying to implore on the government also to understand that impact investing is way large. It is the future. And the world, the Americans and the Europeans have actually taken the moral high ground by claiming that impact investing is theirs while it was created by India. So we are actually going through the Yuga route where somebody else has actually publicized it. Impact investing originated in India, is still the strongest and largest in India. And if you are any player anywhere in the world, you have to play it in India. But the government doesn't recognize it. I have made all possible potential efforts to convince, but I think there is still lack of acknowledgement, and they still see enterprise as an anathema. They don't see that positively. So that fight continues. Stock exchange, which is being discussed. There is another battle that is going on there as well. But I think
we have to build our own models, Vineet. We have to build our own models. I think we ourselves have to get out there much more than perhaps we have, and just make sure that it's framed in the context of what we're doing here. KK, I'm going to come to you for 1 minute. I may have to leave, folks. And Priya, can you come in, because I've got another session starting. But KK, may I ask you to take on?
Yeah, in 30 seconds, I'm just going to sort of give my view. And thanks, Pramod, for doing a fabulous job as usual.
Thanks, Pramod.
Moderating this. What I just want to say is, I think we need to have a set of very sharply defined problems, and beyond government, private enterprises like Nudge, like NASCOM Foundation need to take ownership of each one of these areas, get all the stakeholders together, and ensure that, like Sharath mentioned, we reimagine the specific area and how do we really set up new solutions which are technology enabled, which are not really driven by technology, like what Vineet said. And how do you share the success of it? Today, I think we have very few forums to share the success, and how do we learn from each other? I think these are the two initiatives which will really drive scaling of some of this.
Yes, I don't know how important it is. Sometimes it's very important. I think we also need to learn to market the things that we do so well. Impact investment, building these wonderful platforms, what MyGov is doing with within the government. There's astonishing innovation that has happened in our country. Perhaps we need to also make sure that our voices are heard and we define those agendas better. Couldn't have asked for a better panel. Priya, thank you for setting it up. Thank you, Vineet, Arvind, Sharad, KK. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the panelists. And Pramod, thank you for doing such a great job to bring all the different opinions together. It's been amazing
fabulous panel
to hear from all of you. I will now request Gopi to step in as our next speaker. And I think, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to cover a lot of the questions that came. And I'm hoping that Gopi can cover some of these questions because they're quite relevant. It would be great to have you close out this conversation and take the social innovation track to its conclusion. Welcome, Gopi. Just a quick word about Gopi. Gopi is a founder and CEO of Mailin Foundry and also was the group CTO and innovation head for Tata Group. Probably the best person to start talking about innovation in the social sector. He's been a mentor for us as well for the last couple of months, and it's been a pleasure to have him on board working with us on defining some of the social problems that we're working on. Gopi, over to you. Gopi, you seem to be on mute.
Sorry about that. Is my presentation visible, Priya?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Fantastic. So thanks, such a wonderful panel, and it's a privilege to be following this panel. I'll start off where KK left it off. He aptly described that the starting place for defining scale and achieving scale is a sharply defined set of problems. So happy to dive into that to some extent. And this I will dive in, of course, from the social impact standpoint, and that will be the thinking. While some of the areas might look very large to be solved in the social impact sector, I will play out how it can be done and what are the aspects that need to be looked at. I'm a strong believer that in order for a region to grow, a nation to grow, and be equally contributing to the global needs, one of the key elements and the starting part is energy. I do think that in India, we have made significant progress over the last few years. We need to make significant more progress. So as we speak, I'm sitting in a room with a generator running in the subdivision because the power is out. And as we speak, government might be talking about surplus power. So there is a disconnect. Today, we have 400 gigawatts of install capacity, which is up from 200 gigawatts when I first started talking about it. But we need to be at least at 800 gigawatts, at which point we'll still be on a per capita basis or any other way of looking at it, dragging the world average down. And that's a good thing. We don't want to be growing our power generation in the same way that rest of the world has done it. We need to be doing it in a much more planet friendly way. And at the same time, we need to realize that there is no GDP growth or rural sector inclusion, which is going to happen without getting them the basic lifestyle, which doesn't come without the jobs, which do not come without the required amount of energy. However, the question is, by the way, 800 gigawatts, which is a 400 gigawatt add, translates to $400 billion over 10 years. So from a sector which is interested in revenues and profit, that might be the way to think about it. But that's not all. You need transmission and distribution to evacuate this power. And that is another $400 billion. So that's about $80 billion of revenues and the corresponding profits which can be generated in this sector. But then all of these cannot be done in the social sector. So the way to think about it is, where can the social sector contribute? And if inclusion is the goal, last mile is an area where contributions can happen, and smart measurements and aspects of bringing in digital, like was discussed in the earlier panel, need to be thought about. However, I also want to expand the thinking to beyond digital. When we think about innovation and when we think about technology, stopping at digital is comfortable, but it is not adequate. And so if you look at the healthcare center, for example, inclusion of healthcare means that we have to make it accessible. We have to make it accessible in the rural sectors, and for women, infant, and elderly care. In terms of the healthcare spend in India today, it is 3.6% of GDP, whereas my recommendation is that we need to grow it to at least 5% of GDP. This growth, while the GDP itself grows. So the impact will come by making healthcare based on sophistication of analysis. So simplicity of measurement, sophistication of analysis, and providing the warmth of care. So here again, there is an aspect which is digital, but there is an aspect which are sensors. There is an aspect which will ensure that you don't need CT and MR and those kinds of machines to go into rural sectors. Very tough. That's not the way you will be able to equip the primary and secondary care centers. So you need to be smart about what kind of sensors. And as COVID has highlighted the need for digital education, OTT education in particular, the question remains as to how many people can access it comfortably and how can we make it more inclusive. And there are ways and means of doing it, even in low bandwidth scenarios. And how do we also do it in places where the access to even screens is tough. So that's another area of discussion. Water is a tough problem. We are pretty much a water scarce country already. If you look at the entire nation, unless we connect all the sources of water to all the demand in a much better way, we're already water scarce. But in the future, even if we connect all the sources of water to all the sources of demand, we will not have sufficient water. We have to double the sewer treatment facility. We have to double usable water in a manner which is environmentally conducive also. So we cannot put our heads in the sand and expect that just by stating things like desalination and so on, we're going to solve the problem. Desalination might be a solution, but then you have to put in an effort to figure out what you'll do with the brine, and how we will protect the sea life when you dispose of the brine in the waters near the shore. There are many more issues associated with it. Many times when you hear solutions which are simple, like getting water from the atmosphere and so on, you need to dig deep, because when you hear simple solutions for tough problems, that's what they will end up being. They will not be complete, and that's why they have not picked up scale that we are talking about today. And in order to do that, we need to do our own R&D. We are an abysmal 2% of GDP in terms of R&D as of few years ago. The current number, and I didn't put it here because of the sudden change in the number, is at 1% of GDP, including government and private sector. And so you can imagine, if I said 2% was low, 1% is definitely needing improvement for us to solve a problem or problems of Indian kind. We need to at least double there as well. So as you can see, the theme is 2x. Everything has to be 2x, and it has to be done differently. It has to be reimagined, like the previous panel Sharad talked about. We need to train 500 million workers to contribute hands-on in various of these problem areas and create those jobs. And that's how we are going to create livelihoods and lifestyles which matter. And we need to revamp government schools to be more experiential and make people more ready to take on challenges, and use technologies again which will make the difference. Food is another area. We have to reduce food wastage. And today in the urban sector, where we cannot afford to have a 2200 kilocalorie diet, everybody is eating more than that in certain portions of the population. Whereas in the rural sector, where we need a 2200 kilocalorie diet, We don't even have an 1800 kilocalorie diet. So how do we get there? How do we double the agricultural yield? Today our yield is abysmally low again. Again, it's a 2x problem. And that will answer the question the Prime Minister posed in terms of income, but we need to do it without robbing the soil of its own future, which has happened in the past. So these are all problems which can be solved by technology, but its technology is not the silver bullet. Yeah. So when we look at technology, one way to look at it is I'm showing you how I do it. This is my birth chart, if you would. I've used this for a good 25 years, and be it discussion on profitable companies or be it a discussion on NGO kind of companies, and social enterprises can span both. Everyone needs to have a view of something equivalent of this. There are geopolitical trends, which I start with. Pandemic, migrant dynamics, climate change, terrorism, micro capitalism, oil prices, emerging markets. These are all always in the news. The priority in the news might change, but this will drive the needs. And then there are consumer trends and social trends, which are also part, which is social distancing. As an example, which is new, but premiumization. And by the way, if you think rural sectors do not require premiumization, we'll have to think again. The fact that we need to produce for the greater masses doesn't mean that they will accept lower quality, or for that matter, they don't want customization. Health and wellness, digitization, graying population. COVID has highlighted that again, women decision makers. These are all things which will drive the kind of needs in the near future. So you see also the needs, our current needs and emerging needs, we need to have a view of both. So if it is today mobility, tomorrow it's virtual presence. It doesn't matter urban, rural. Connected rural consumers, last panel talked about it. It's not just the urban consumer, but rural consumers are connected in low bandwidth. And tomorrow we need connected rural things, even if we want to enable the right treatment of straw, which is being generated through agriculture. Vernacular media, it is arrogant to think that one language and one foreign language will cover the needs of the media for the entire country. I think it is upon us to look at vernacular media. Not only that, we need to take care of differently abled people. We need to include how they will be able to look at media if everything is going online. And if you cannot see, then there is hearing which is possible. But we need to be thinking in those manner, and early health will give way to predicting and preventing. Early health is being able to diagnose and cure, but I think even with COVID, it is the ability to predict and prevent who is more susceptible. And also early screening is the success of many countries which have done it well. Only then, once we understand this, does technology come in. And I would strongly recommend all the folks who are listening in now and later to think about technology beyond digital. Also think about it as computing, and think about the details, but include biology and materials in all your thinking. Nobody can develop innovation and technology without thinking about biology. I'm not a biologist, but if I don't understand genomics, I don't understand microbiomics, transcriptomics, I am not going to be able to think through solutions for problems such as COVID. I will play at the surface and around the surface and be happy with that, but we will not solve the problem. Um, so I'm not intending to dive into the technology area, but very quickly I wanted to talk about one area, which is AI. Priya did want me to spend some time on it. I'll spend 5 minutes on it before opening up for questions. Artificial intelligence is good. But it can be used in all kinds of manner. So the key input should be that as social impact entrepreneurs, you need to look at, and we need to look at AI for good. We need to realize that AI is not human intelligence. Human intelligence is very complex. IQ, EQ, emotional quotient, the experiential learning, which is hand quotient, which is my terminology, and what the environment is giving to you in terms of contributing bacteria in your gut, in your skin, in every cavity that you have. And you have intelligence from that as well. It is not possible to replicate today in AI. What you're trying to do is pick one area, which is the neural understanding of our nervous system, and mathematically reproduce it. So what we are doing is looking at the neuron, understanding that it performs really simple computation, which is multiplication, aggregation, adding biases, which is addition, and then using a non-linearity, which are all very simple mathematical operations. So the strength of our own biological neural network comes from its massive interconnectivity, and so also of the mathematical neural networks. And neural networks is only one of the many AI techniques, but it is the reason why everybody is talking about AI today. And there is development which is a little bit new in addition to the computational power, which is the ability to throw anything at a neural network because of small changes in the algorithm. So previously, if we had images and videos, we would do things like discrete cosine transform and use only limited set of coefficients if you would to represent the image, losing much in the process. But today we can throw the whole image, whole video with the audio into the neural network and expect an outcome of the kind that we seek. So there is a lot which can be done by using neural networks for sensor fusion. When you have multiple sensors, sensor doesn't have to be an electronic sensor. Sensor can be somebody going and doing a survey in a rural sector, looking at for patterns and mapping patterns, automation of analysis that you already know how to do, but it takes a long time, implementing rules which some expert knows in his head, but bringing it out and implementing it in a manner which can scale, image analysis, natural language processing, voice recognition, and image recognition. These are all things which have made significant progress in the recent years. And the applications are many, and they apply to social sector. In health and wellness, we can really go sophisticated on the sensing and go very low cost on the sensing. We go very miniaturized on the sensing because you can go even more sophisticated on the analysis using AI. In agricultural spraying, you can recognize what kind of spraying, how much spraying, in which area based on the crop, the images of the crop. You can determine what kind of learning syllabus should be allocated to individuals, and based on their progress, what kind of changes need to be made. You can stream in low bandwidth conditions. You can observe and recommend ideas for driver safeties as an example for truck driver safety. And you can process and automate anything which is knowledge based to some extent. And for example, legal process automation, which might be very scary in the rural sector, can be automated. I'll end with this. You might be curious to know, if you're a social enterprise, how do you look at an AI strategy? The questions to ask yourself are the following. Number one is we need to make sure that we're thinking about AI ethics. We're thinking about data privacy, and we're thinking about AI for good all the way. So it's not that just the objective and outcome is good, but all the way, including data privacy. Key to AI, and 80% of the work goes into the data. So what data does the social enterprise have or can generate? For example, there is data available with the police, which can be used for many applications. Do you have access to that? Can you get access to that? If not, can we work with the regulators to get access to that? What manual decisions today take significant government time, which makes things stuck, or an expert's time, so that we can automate? Are there aspects of intelligence that can be captured and used by voice, sound, image, or video? Because that's where the greatest progress of AI has been. And you can do scale operations by deploying sensors which can look at this and automate the recognizing actions that you want to identify without a problem. But keep in mind, privacy is of concern. Can you fuse sensors? Can you eliminate previous techniques? Do not try to only automate existing techniques, because that is a starting point. Really, what you need to be looking at is, given that this is a new game, like Sharad said, the new players should be thinking about totally different ways of solving the problems. And can you do things at the edge? Edge maintains more privacy, edge maintains more security. And then what you need to do at the cloud? These are all the things that you can think about while looking at social problems. I'll end by saying that India is a fantastic place to be right now. It's a beautiful country. It is a high energy country. It has great demographics. It has great technology power, and the ability to get all of this together and to the next level is for the youth to have the confidence that they can solve the toughest problems. They need to know which are the toughest problems. They need to have access to the best of technology and realize that technology doesn't stop at digital, and take all that they have in them and know that they can make a difference. Over to you again, Priya.
Thank you, Gopi. Thank you so much. I have one question that I want to take up, and I would love if all the other panelists can also switch on their video, because I thought this was a very interesting question, and we could end with, and the right question to end with. The question is, what is your vision to eradicate poverty in India? What are some of the most important systemic changes and collaborations needed? What are your thoughts on minimum income? How do you think that the basic dignity of each person, roti, kapda, makan, be achieved? And I thought it's a great conversation to have on this forum and hearing from all of you. So Sharad and Vineet, if you can also, and I think Arun is also here. So if all of you can switch on your video, and we can take quick 2 minutes round robin, go and what are your big ideas on how do we eradicate poverty in India? We'll start with Gopi.
Sure, Priya. So I have a bias. I think that the way to do this is by creating jobs, by making people enabled to solve their own problems. Now, job creation can happen only if you are in an ecosystem where there is factories, where there is agricultural outcomes, and those are in turn enabled by having the right public infrastructure. That public infrastructure is very critically driven by energy. So I think that the first step is working with the government to get the right levels of power in order to power the rest of the needs. And then the private sector and social enterprises can come together to solve rest of the problems.
Should I go to Arvind?
Yeah, Priya, my brief thing on that is I think we have to ensure that there is a good public social security net around people who have just moved out of poverty or are just below the poverty line. So that and which are those areas that they're spending the most on? Health. Of course, jobs, nobody will debate that. But so beyond that, where is the expenditure, which is health, education? And if we can give them a social security network through direct interventions or better education, more empowerment, so that they once they cross the poverty line, become aspirational India, they stay there and keep going upwards. There are no unwanted costs in health or better education. They don't have pressure to send their kids to private schools. So I think which all interventions we can do, whether that's more digital technology or just better education infrastructure or health infrastructure, we'll have to think very holistically, and that's how you move more people from the below poverty line into our poverty line and make them stay there.
Sharad?
It's a wonderful question for which I don't have an answer. I am myself looking for the answer. I'm searching, and I am myself in a beginner's mind learning about this. So I don't know the answer. All I know is that, there is something special about us as Indians, which is that each one of us is willing to invest in education, right? I mean, even at the everybody believes education is a great investment. We got to make this come to life. Everybody we are the only culture in the world where health is as much about wellness as it is about illness. So if we can harness that, the only way to have cost effective health system in India is to harness wellness, right? And we are exporting this to the rest of the world. We have potential to do this much better than before, and ultimately everybody in India is willing to be an entrepreneur. And this is where I think we need a new concept. We need to equip our smallest entrepreneur with what I like to think of it as zero friction entrepreneurship. We must be able to establish zero friction, right? Today, the friction of being an entrepreneur is very, very high. And I think there is some talk in the government to make ease of doing business better. But we need a game-changing approach here. We don't need to improve 10 points, 20 points. We need to improve 100 points here. And so that requires rethinking the paradigm completely. And then we will unleash the energy of every Indian. And that is how I think we'll go forward. I am still learning the answer. If people have good suggestions on this, I am all ears. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gopi, Arvind, and Sharad. And I think Vineet is probably there on mute as well. So thank you to all the panelists. And what an amazing closing session for us at the Social Innovation Track. And to all the attendees, thank you so much for coming in. We would love to follow on, have conversations, figure out what are collective actions that we can take. So please follow us on our social media, and we would love to hear from you. Bye, everybody, and thank you so much for being part of the Social Innovation Track at Charcha 2020.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.